Welcome in. I'm Melinda Brandt, and this is A Seat at the Table. Unfortunately, Ashley couldn't be with us today, but we are still pulling up a chair with Dorothy Jones. Dorothy, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So one of my favorite things about this show is hearing how people got started, where their journey began, and what led them to where they are today. And you have spent 27 years building a successful career. You climbed into leadership, and by most people's standards, you did everything right. And then your story didn't stop there. You said, you know what, I've got another chapter. And I definitely want to get into that chapter as you are the founder of Wisdom Wealth. And I want to get into that. But first, let's talk about the road that got you there. What was young Dorothy like? I know you weren't even born in the U.S., so let's start there.
No, I wasn't. I was actually born in Vietnam during the war. And my mother was Vietnamese, and my father was an American black soldier, and they weren't married. So I was kind of one of those products of what they call the unwanted children. It's a term used for children who are not born of any country because of the marriage. So I actually was not a Vietnamese citizen nor a U.S. citizen. And from there, my parents, smartly enough, saw that I look black, put me into an orphanage and established my citizenship as a Vietnamese citizen so that I could be immigrated into the U.S. or to another country. And that happened when I was 3 with my sister who was 1.
So did y'all both were able to come here at the same time?
Yes, actually it took another 3.5 years that we were in Vietnam during that war, and we didn't leave until probably like 2 months before the U.S. pulled out. So we kind of came from right underneath the cut before the North Vietnamese took over the South. So yes, we were able to come together, and I was 6.5 when I came to the States.
Since you were placed in an orphanage in order to come here, once you got here, did y'all stay in an orphanage, or were you able to find a home?
Well, what's interesting is that, we look, like I said, black children. So we had a tough time, but when you're kids, all you know is that you're Vietnamese. We were adopted by a white family in the States that had already adopted some other biracial children and had one of their own. So we came to the States and were adopted into a big family of multicultural family. And yeah, we were both adopted together, and I was 6.
Oh, well, at least y'all got to stay together.
Yeah.
Was that able throughout all of your teen years? Were y'all in this one family?
Yeah, we were, but it wasn't, unfortunately, a good placement for me. We moved about 21 times, and I realized, I realized that even though we were a biracial family, there was a lot of, what I learned from my adopted mother, a lot of discriminatory time. And sometimes the move was just for best because of the neighborhood or the culture, which I didn't know. So I think it really affected me. So I left them when I was 13. I ran away from home. And I spent the rest of my adolescent years in foster care, group homes, and eventually aged out of foster care at 18.
So leaving at 13, you just knew something wasn't right. What gave you... here's where I'm going with this. At some point, you started trusting your gut.
Yes.
And I'm going to guess that has led you all the way to where you are today. You even knew that at an early age of 13?
Yes, I did. And thank you for saying that, because I do reflect back in the way they say, how God built you. And I do believe that at 13, there was a lot of things going on. And my adopted mother and parents, we ended up communicating and coming back later in years and talking. And she said that I just came to her and said, you know what, this is not for me. This is not the right place for me. And she knew that I didn't want to be here anymore, that this wasn't the right fit at 13, yes. And that led me to say that I needed to go off and find a better family situation, which unfortunately I didn't find and ended up being foster care.
It was extremely brave of you to set out. Well, I'm going to go with brave.
Okay.
Because,
Yes,
as a teen, I can't even imagine just thinking, this isn't for me. I know there's something better. I'm going to go and search for that. So from 13 to 18, what did life look like for you?
Yeah, that's amazing. I think this is where, I think about why I brought up that I was born Vietnamese but looked African American. I came to the States speaking Vietnamese, living in a white family. And so going into the foster care, they actually put me into African American families, which was another culture shock because I've never been with African American families. So that was the first part. It was culture shock. Also being like the extended person, the one plus, the one they didn't plan for. There was a lot of misfits. Again, teenagers, now that I have one of my own, there's probably a little bit of hard head and rebellion side of me that didn't work. And so I end up eventually going into a better fit, which was a group home where there's really not a parent, but a kind of a mother, and there was other children that were the same age. So it ended up being more like a dormitory group of girls. And even I had a little time because I was not staying home and kept running away. Believe it or not, I actually spent some time in juvenile detention. And it was an experience there, learning to meet some of the kids who were in bad situations that were in detention for a lot of situations that helped me kind of learn about people. So, yeah, it was a learning experience of meeting a lot of different people in a lot of circumstances and learning how to fit in.
Well, what in particular lessons were you able to take from those different scenarios that you took into starting into corporate America?
One of the things that I really learned by living in all these home situations, I had to learn to adapt and find a way to fit in. And a lot of times because of people's culture or family order or where they lived or their economics, I learned to like and listen to people and accept them for who they are. Because here I am as a foster kid going into a high school, like what we would say here, like a Lakeway or Westlake, and I'm in a foster care and learning how to fit in these prominent schools, still keep faith, still keep learning how to study. I learned empathy, and I learned how to accept people for who they are and listen to their story. And that helps me, of course, with the corporate side, which I went into sales.
Well, and that's the biggest part of why we do this show, is realizing you don't just wake up one day and you've got it all together. You're owning companies or you're real successful. There is a journey to get there. Yeah. So after 18, you turned 18, you aged out of the system.
Yes.
And you were just set out on your own?
Yes, and that will tie in later with my wisdom wealth and why I created that. Well, because of my determination, thinking that, being on your own as a teenager, no rules, no parents, yay,
yes,
freedom! And then you go, what do you mean you got to fill out an application for rent? What do you mean you need me to pick out what benefits I want at a job and a car? How do you drive and get insurance? And it just was a reality check, and I had to figure this out, and it was not easy. I just, you go into some place and go, how do I fill this out? And so, I started with a roommate, which was another young lady who aged out of foster. And that didn't work out, so I ended up living with some boyfriends and stuff like that. But I knew I had to get a job, and that's all I knew. And yes, that was my start in going, I got to get out there and make money. And through that experience, I was always looking for more ways to making more money. But I was, believe it or not, extremely shy. I mean, imagine that. My whole life has been this transition.
Yeah.
And my story and embarrassment and self-consciousness, I kept quiet because, of course, I didn't want people to know the shame of being a foster kid or being, sometimes even homeless or in a bad situation. I was kind of shy. But being in sales, which was the easiest job you can get in retail, to get advancement, you had to start to learn how to take leadership roles, start asking for what you want, start talking to people and learning how to manage up. And I came across a manager in my early teens, thank goodness, who taught me how.
And what was the secret sauce?
What she told me was, she goes, I said, I want to be an assistant manager. And she goes, okay. And I said, well, how do I get that job? And she said, well, you need to take initiative. And being young, and I'm like, what is initiative?
What do you mean by that?
What is initiative? And she said, well, if you want to be in a position, you need to start showing your value. You need to start doing the job before you're asked. You need to come in early and shadow and start talking to the people that are in the position. You need to start giving us ideas, spending a little time learning how to do the work before you get the job. And then, by the way, you have to also be able to learn leadership. And in doing that, you're going to have to shadow me and spend some time that is not paid. and come in and do things. And I'm like, okay. And ever since then, in my career, I always look for what could I do to get into that next position. I've never waited for somebody to ask me, are you ready? I always took that lesson of going, how can I understand what that job needs me to be?
I think that's so important nowadays, especially when we look at the young kids. I was raised much like what you just said this manager taught you is you go in, you learn everything. Even if that's not what you have an interest in, you go in and learn it because you don't know when that might help you move
Absolutely.
up to the next spot. When talking, because I do know that you do talk with the younger generation, how do you convey that to them in a world that seems to be, well, I'm entitled to it. I got made it to 18. I'm entitled to have that job. I'm entitled to have this salary that comes with it.
Yeah, and when I was a manager, and I've been a manager since now my teens, all the way to Verizon, the thing that I constantly teach all of them is they're not entitled. And often I had jobs where people are like, how did you even know about that job? And one of the things I teach all of them is when you walk into a room, no matter if at work or an event at your corporation, you have to learn to go and introduce and meet people with interests. And you never know who you're going to run into and the story they tell you and what they can teach you so that you're able to go, oh, I didn't even know that existed. And so, for example, my first time I shared the story with them, I wanted to be in Verizon and some other corporate job, and they were saying you got to network, and I'm like, oh my God, kill me already. I'm really shy.
The last thing I want to do is
don't want to talk to people, and I don't know what to say and whatever. And so I went to one of these networking things at Fridays, and I told them, I said one of the things I teach them, I said, I went in there and took a breath. I said, everyone in here came here to meet someone. So I took my time and I walked through the whole room and introduced myself to every person in the room randomly. And it was the scariest thing in the world. But then all of a sudden people kind of looked at me like, who is this woman that everybody needs to know? And I learned how to approach people. So what I tell my employees or other people is when you go to an event or when you go even into a social event for family, don't sit with people you know. Everyone has an interesting story. There is a connection that you might make personally or professionally. And if you want to connect, it's not going to be because somebody's going to come up to you and go, oh, by the way, Melinda, I'm going to give you this.
Yeah.
Is when they say, oh, you know what, I remember when she came up to me and generally met me and was interested. And that's how I spend my entire life. So I did that in sales training. After a while, when I took new salespeople, we would go to a Fridays or a bar, whatever, a restaurant bar, and I would challenge them. I said, if you can meet two random people without offending them, the first round is on me. Teaching them how to have a social conversation, which I think is so important today because there's so many interesting people. And I have gotten careers, resources, and just great friendship by people I meet randomly.
Well, and that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you. How much of your success came from what you knew versus who and what you were willing to learn from?
Yeah, I would say all of it was who I was willing to meet and learn from. Because I struggle with language, I step back a little bit. I was in elementary school when I came here, and back then they didn't really have a good transition of kids that couldn't speak English. But my adoptive mother thought it was a good idea to keep all the kids in separate grades, so she put me right in first grade. And first grade, and you couldn't speak English. So I spent a lot of years struggling with English and writing, and so school wasn't really fun. Math and science was great. And I say that is that I didn't assume that education was going to be the direction to get my advancement. So what I ended up doing in that networking and meeting people, it was at Verizon. I was at a retail store, and there was a person starting to sell these portable phones and this internet card that connect laptops wirelessly that would come and show us in our office. And I was like, this is different. I don't know this. And I followed her for the whole training, and I said, can I have a one-on-one with you? What do I need to do to learn what you're learning? Because that looks like the new future. And she said, here's what you need to learn. She told me what I need to read, what was important, what was coming out. Fast forward, I became the first data solutions trainer for all of the smartphones, text messaging, mobile web for all of the Midwest, because I was talking to her when she said that there was more position. She goes, I think I have somebody who might be good at this. And she had already given me the materials that I was reading and studying and preparing for that job, just because of my connection.
So is this curiosity on your part, wanting to know how everything works? Is it knowing, okay, if I know this, the chances are I can move up more and more, maybe a combination of both of them?
I would say a combination of both. I tell people, be curious. We have this new, especially technology, I'm glad I grew up in because it changes so quickly. But I think even in any business, there is an evolution that is very much changing quickly. And I learned from some of my leadership and my networking that you have to continually evolve. It could mean moving to another location. It could mean taking a job that you were just not familiar with, or learning to do certificates and skills. So I knew to survive or maybe get advancement, always going to take about a 1 to 2 year shift that is needed in one of those categories. So it was either education, it was either taking a different job, it could be relocating or a education. But I knew that every 2 years I had to make a strategic direction and move.
Did that also include moving not only in your positions, but moving around?
Yeah, it was. It was interesting because I lived in a city, Grand Rapids, Michigan, which was like Austin, very small, very like people grew up and everyone knew each other. And they were like, okay, you have to stay here, and people have kids through high school, whatever else. And I found with, I was actually working with Victoria's Secret as well as Verizon, that there are these large locations, but they wouldn't promote people within the same city into leadership. And that's usually the challenge, and I think a lot of young kids don't understand. You don't automatically get the job because you're in that city and in that department.
Not just young kids don't understand that. That seems like it would be a natural evolution. Okay, well, you're already here. We've got this position open. Is there a reason behind?
Yeah, and I asked that again, to be able to, and they said, well, the reason why is sometimes, number one, it's like going from a small fish to being a big fish in a big pond. And the jump might be large. And in most cases, in my job, and I don't know of your experience and other people, most jobs do not have a manual that says, this is how the job works and every day, and this is what you do, and it's going to be perfect. No, they kind of give you the keys and titles and say, by the way, you might have somebody help you for a week, or you got to figure it out. So they feel that the leap is too big. Also, there's other people that maybe you're a peer to that may not follow leadership, which I thought was crap, be honest with you, because I've worked hard and I would do it. But what I've learned is that when you move into a different location or a different department, they feel like you're developing the skills to come back and be that.
And be the big fish.
And be the big fish. And I thought for a while, that's crazy. I don't want to move. That's risky. And it actually worked, because there was not a job once I moved out of the city and went after other jobs that after that, it was, where did you want to go? What department did you want to do next?
You put in the hard work and it paid off eventually.
Yes.
And you did this for 27 years?
Yes, I did. It was incredible. I was recruited many times. I always wonder how I stayed with Verizon 27 years. And I tell people, because I also received 12 promotions or 12 different jobs in Verizon. And the reason, and many of the jobs weren't even in existence, or I was doing a build or a cleanup. So it was always like a new startup for me. And because I was willing to take that job that people go, why would you do it? It's hard. Or does it pay enough? Why did you relocate to St. Louis? And why did you move to Detroit? No one moves to Detroit. It gave me that momentum to just continue to climb, and it was easier to live within that corporation.
Which brings us to the next question. I think there are going to be people that won't understand your decision that came next.
Yeah.
After 27 years, you decided for you, the best move was to walk away.
Yes.
Talk us through that.
Oh, my goodness. And I want to give a shout out to the St. Louis team. I was a director there, and it was kind of a interesting last day. I walked out of St. Louis. Well, actually, I left one of my big moments in Verizon was awards in that region. It was Missouri and Kansas City. And I didn't know I was getting an award. I was never a big award person. Just give me the job and the money. And they knew that I was leaving. And the whole region stood up and gave me a standing ovation. And I was like, never had that in my life. Again, I was one of the only women, the only Black woman, the only one. I was like, no, I'm just going to quietly go away. And what happened is I did end up having a child, which I don't do anything normal. When I was 40 years old, I found out I was pregnant and had a son. And so I moved to a city where I was still with Verizon until he was about 3. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, so I was a single mama. And then when later on I moved to Austin for a job where I wasn't managing people so I could be with him more, which unfortunately made me travel more. I was working with General Motors and all their high-tech things and everything else. Well, COVID hit. Yeah. And part of my job, because of the size of my counts, I was out of the state twice a month. And so I was overnight or I had au pair, but he was such a great kid. He was so easygoing. He was that kid that you could take anywhere in a restaurant and nobody even knew, or a plane. I was lucky. But COVID hit, and I would tell him if the door was closed, unless you're bleeding, don't come in. If the door is open, I'm on a conference call, you can come in. And I saw him start coming in and sitting with me. And he'll ask me random questions. He goes, well, Mom, if you wanted to be a superhero, what superpower would you want? And we're on a conference.
How old was he at this time?
He was in elementary school.
Oh, my goodness.
And he wanted just to talk. And then he would fall asleep in the corner of my office on days as long as the door is open. And I thought he was okay that I was traveling. It's been our life.
Yeah.
But I realized that he needed me here. And soon he was going to go into middle school. And then middle school would be high school. Also, realistically, I was getting in my 50s, and I realized, too, technology, there is a shift in some ageism in these companies. And I thought, with the energy that I have, the smarts that I might still have in my brain, and time with my son, this next 3 to 5 years is probably the time that I'm going to shift before I'm forced to, either in career or I'm going to miss out that 3 and 5 years with him. Mm-hmm. And that's when I was like, okay, done. Got to walk away.
Well, I can't imagine that that's an easy decision to make, because you've had that stability, and then you walk away and you're not guaranteed that stability. So was it a process over time, like you started thinking, and then the more you thought about it, the more you realized, okay, this is me? Is it going back to that gut instinct that you had at 13, that you just knew this was the right thing to do for you?
I think hindsight is 2020, but I would say the first thought was gut instincts, because, like I said, I knew that there, and it was shortly after, there was lots of layoffs in the tech sector, and I knew that there is a time where you get forced to try to reinvent yourself. And I was emotionally more ready now, even though I did not know where I was going or how it was going to happen, but I knew physically, emotionally, and a purpose was this time. And that was going to be the driver for me to work really hard and fight for this. And I knew that this was the time to do it. So that was kind of more the gut feeling and why I said, you got to do it now.
So during this time that you're deciding to walk away, did you already have an idea of what the next chapter would look like, or you just knew it's not going to be here, I'll do something?
Well, during the time I was at Verizon, I did start trying different side hustles, because I knew, I think everybody in corporate America or in any corporation, I tell people they have this dream at their desk going, what will I do when I grow up? Or how do I get out of here? We have those dreams, and I did too. So I first started, when I was working at Verizon, I started a travel agency. Guess what? Right before COVID. And so
probably not the best film.
had a great 6 months, but I learned how to establish a business and got all my certificate, and all the expenses to get those licenses and everything else gave me a taste. So that's one of the things that I would probably recommend for people, is really try to do something while you have some stability. because honestly, you are going to have to work dual jobs. But when you're on your own, and any entrepreneur I think you've talked to, you work those hours anyway.
Yeah.
The difference is you have the stability and everything else. So that happened. I'm also a very active, I'm always about money. That's why I got finance. And so I learned back in 18, around my 20s and 30s, I was struggling financially. And I decided that, you know what, the world can't be that hard to understand money. And I started studying about money because I didn't have anybody teach me. So I was reading Susan Orman and David Ramsey, and then I'm like, stocks. I'm going to trade stocks. And so I started in my 30s and things like that. So during COVID, I had actually started taking professional trading classes and learning how to trade markets. So I learned how to trade in other international, whatever else, again, to make money, that's side money. And then that's when I decided to talk to people about a different job in the finance industry and how can I be that trader and help out. And then they were telling me more and more about the industry. And I said, great, I can be a support person for financial advisors who are in the trading desk. Now here I am in my 40s, going in my 50s. I didn't care. I never thought about age. I never thought about gender. That was not my style. And then somebody said, well, Dorothy, no. I think you have to be with people. You like coaching. You like helping out. You know how to talk tech, and you know how to trade those markets. You should be a financial advisor. I said, sure, I have this savings. I have this. Let me do that. And that's when I went into that direction because it was a marriage between my technical skills, my financial interests and money, and then helping others. I was like, and sales. I'm like, okay, let's go for it. And I met some people. Yeah.
So, and you did start
Yes.
to do the financial advising, and then at some point you went out on your own and you founded Wisdom Wealth.
Yeah.
Did that idea come from coaching and you trying to figure it out for yourself and trying to give people a leg up that you didn't necessarily have when it comes to that type of knowledge?
Yeah, and so let me clarify one thing. I'm still a financial advisor with Capital Strategies and a licensed financial advisor. And to try to build clients, which means that we're 1099, kind of to explain people who don't know how financial advisors get paid, but kind of like a real estate agent. You're your own business. So I'm still with Capital Strategies here in Austin as a financial license advisor. To drum up business, I thought this great idea about having workshops, because I did that in Verizon teaching the salespeople how to use tech. Mm-hmm. I also used to go back to foster homes and teach life skills when I was younger because I knew they struggled like I did.
That's so important.
And I was like, I would teach them about how to mix and match clothes, how to fill out applications. So I was teaching all these life skills. So I thought, why not do some workshop? Because what I was running into is that I would meet women first and I would tell them all about the great things I do, finance, and the eyes would glaze. And they're like, I wish I knew more. I wish I understood more, but my husband took care of that. It seems complicated.
I was just about to ask, why is it that it seems that women have a tendency to be a lot more timid when it comes to finances, either knowing it? I know for me, that wasn't something that was taught in my family. My parents took care of it. They were very much of the mindset, we take care of this, you're a child, you don't need to learn about that. Well, that works great when you're a child. When you're not a child, and then you're left wondering, where do I go? What is it, even asking for a raise or saying, the starting pay, I think I'm worth more. What is it about? Is it really a woman-man type thing? Is there something that's inherently in us that we don't push for those things?
I agree. I've listened to different studies, and I think it is so true, and I'm just a victim of it as well, is that we need to be a certain percentage of knowledge and in order and in understanding before we take action. So that delays us a lot further from taking the action. So before we go into investment, we want to know the entire market. I'm like, okay, guys, there's thousands of investments. We want to know that that purchase or that job or whatever, we fit all of up to 80% full. And I think that's what happens with also finance, is that we understand how to budget and spend. But when we start sitting down and having to be a little bit more strategic about understanding a certain product, it becomes, okay, I need to know 80%. But by the way, I'm raising kids, I'm running a job, I'm doing all these different things that are so important that we don't take the time. And then when I was with an investment group, I had a group of women. We broke off from a group of men because then the conversation wasn't always slowed down or explained to us in a way that is just simplified. Like all that jargon is crap.
Right.
Same thing with technology in all of our industry. And so what I was telling them is we're so smart. We purchase and manage not only the household, the budgets, eventually our parents' money. They're our spouse's parents' money, and even sometimes our spouse. We live longer, and we start running the business. So we're smart enough. We just need it simplified, and we just need it to be explained to us that it makes sense. And that's when I started doing the workshops, taking that technical skills I had from Verizon, going, it doesn't matter what algorithm or what it's called. It's, by the way, when having this device, you can go shopping. Well, by having this investment, you can actually go on vacation without having to worry about charging up your credit card. You can actually build your business or buy a big purchase, or you can pay for college. But here's how you do it, and here are the simple steps. And that's what I started Wisdom Wealth for, because a lot of times, because of couples, maybe they're not ready to hire me to manage assets. Maybe their husband or another financial advisor was doing that. There was a great workshop I had in my first one, and most of the women were very wealthy. And one of the women, husband is, I think, her financial advisors with HEB. I mean, HEB's financial advisor. So obviously they're a little above my pay grade. And she goes, but you explain things so well. How can you help me explain what they put together? Because my husband's getting sick, and I might have to take it over. And by the way, my kids are still in middle school and high school, and it just seems really complicated. Can I sit down with you? So I sat down with her and walk her through her plan, explain what all these things are, things that made her give her notes, and we did those sessions for a while. And I was doing it for free because financial advisors can't charge for that kind of coaching and training unless you're a client. And so I talked to Capital Strategies, and I said, there's a need for here. Mm-hmm. The people need to be stepped through. That doesn't always mean engaging in investments and foundational assets. They want to get educated. They want to know more. And how does it apply to them? And that's why I started Wisdom Wealth, was to sit down in those coaching sessions. And then, of course, some of my friends were like, can you talk to my 21-year-old? Can you talk to my teenagers? And then I started doing that as well, because it's different from someone else. I always tell them, you can take my son and advise him, please, because he won't listen to me.
Right.
But I'll take the rest of them. So Wisdom Wealth was created to slow it down and really give people the life skills that attaches to all this financial jargon.
So how are you able to make money with Wisdom Wealth? You just separate it from what you're doing as the advisor? Yeah, so mainly how I engage is usually somebody would say, I need help. Like a doctor. I'm like, okay, how does help? What does that mean? What the symptoms are.
What does it mean? And through a kind of a quick discovery call, I kind of distinguish what help means. And that's how I do make money. When I find that, you know what, they may be not enough assets, they may not be ready for those things, then a Wisdom Wealth engagement to help them get ready for a hire of a financial advisor. Or, like I said, you already have a financial advisor. You just want that woman who understanding, no shame, no blame. And believe me, from my story, I have done it all wrong. And I understand there's no judgment.
From where I'm sitting, it seems like you've done it all right. So I think that's awesome.
So yeah, I am able to make money, but usually I will distinguish between the need. And then sometimes the client who starts with the education builds that wealth. And Wisdom Wealth has only been around a couple of years now. Then they will become a client, but it's not an option or a requirement. And they say, you know what, I do want you to hire. I want you now to take my money and help me learn how to invest. But it's not a requirement. This gives me another avenue.
Well, you spent a lot of years helping companies grow. Now it sounds like you're helping people grow. Mm-hmm. What's the big difference between the two?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think the biggest difference is probably budgets. But I think it's the same thing, is that, you know, I do believe, and I have a heart, that if you do right by people, then that just the ripples in generations. So when I'm helping a family, it's not just a family, it's the kids, it's the next generation. And then they bring me their friends, and now it becomes a community. I do workshop with a bunch of teenagers or young adults. That feels so good. And so I think it definitely is less money, but it's the same concept. You are trying to find, you want to plug in the leaks, and you want to elevate the people. And in doing that, that becomes a success. And so I kind of look at they're both the same thing, except for, like I said, the corporations pay a little bit more, just a little bit, but it does come back in many other ways too.
So for anyone, just a quick sidestep for your wisdom wealth here, anyone that is looking for advice, help, coaching, understanding, any of these workshops, where would they go? Are you offering these weekly? Are they at certain places? Give us a little bit more information about that.
Yes, I do have a website where you can schedule a discovery call. I am actually hosting, and I have it on my social media, family this summer. I'm doing family meeting sessions.
Okay.
So if you're interested, yes, reach out to me through the website, or I'll provide some information for you. And during the summer, because there's so many kids, I'm doing small community group of kids while they're out of school, 2-day workshops. In July, I will be starting every other week, a kind of 101 of finance and how to begin to go from managing to building. And that will be available. And again, on my website, you can register. And that is going to be in Zoom. I am licensed nationwide, so I can take clients everywhere. But that's how you reach me, is through my website. But I do those workshops. Either you hire me for those, or you join me in some of the ones that I already have out there.
Okay. So you've done a lot in your life. How has success, or the definition, or what you thought success would be, how has it evolved for you over the years?
Yeah, it's interesting is I think I've been in more survival than I ever focused on what would success look like, until I became a financial advisor and I started asking other people, what does life look like for you in X years? Who are you? What do you want to do? Because that's really the wisdom, and that's also the wealth. It's not always financial. The numbers will come. And asking that enough times, I started thinking about that for myself. And I realized that the thing that I love the most is that I want to be away in a different country or state for 30 days, being in a cafe, meeting people, but I don't need any more stuff. And I would be hosting or coaching or giving back in some ways in those cities that I have. And so my success is being able to build this business and hopefully have more other coaches that provides me that freedom to start venturing out. I tell people I want to venture before I'm part of the fanny pack group that can't that can't make it to yoga class in Spain. I want to travel when I can do the small hikes, and that would be success for me. Is the life experience, that the freedom that will give me. That's when I know that I'll be successful.
Well, you just said that knowing who you are is a big step. Why is that so important, that people understand who they are in an effort to get to where they want to go?
Oh, I'm so glad you had that. And actually, that is my pillar of my number one step on my financial advising or coaching. Before we ever get to the numbers, I need to know you. There are traditions, there are traumas, there are experience, there's knowledge, and there are wants that are unique to you. And a lot of the things that have happened, either good or bad, happened in childhood. Well, me not ever having enough drove me to this career. So money was a scarcity thing. And learning about those things and learning about yourself, I have a fun Monday personality thing on my website. You can go out and figure out what kind of money personality. And it shows you what things you could do to complement that personality. But knowing what you want and who you are helps you to develop to get to where you're going. It doesn't work the same for Melinda as Dorothy. Your wealth and what you value is totally different. So knowing who you are helps you to either overcome, modify, or even expand your skill set. And that's what I always start with in every coaching, in every financial engagement.
Do you ever see like this light go off, or this like just look of, what do you mean, who am I?
My favorite thing is there's guarantee a spender and a saver that are married. At 99% of the time, they're, or a couple or whatever, they were like, he spends or she spends, whatever. And I tell them that 99% of the time, that's it. I said, but both of you can be successful is balancing the compliment and those things. And that's where they start having fun, because it's like realizing that to learn about each other and your habits and things, how it complements and how they can go together. It was one of those moments like, oh, it is important for that person, because when they were younger, they didn't have anything. I literally had a couple that are making $1 million a year in his salary. And she was in tears about worrying about having enough money because of the scarcity in her life. He was like, you know what, I can always make the money over. Just let's put all in risk. And I'm looking at these two like, ah. And part of getting them together and start talking about, and he didn't realize how much that was a pain for her. And I think that aha moment then helps them to begin to start working together. And money.
Well, you didn't even know you were a marriage counselor.
I know. No, I didn't. I just love seeing the face when they're like, oh, throw it to the wind. I'm like.
You have helped so many people solve problems like we were just talking about. What do you think people get wrong in wealth, in managing their wealth, but also maybe get wrong in leadership if they're in the business world or trying to climb? Is there something that is not connecting for people that may hold them back?
So for leadership, I had a wonderful little experience. So, of course, I'm a leader, and I was younger, and I ran a retail store, and I came from Victoria's Secret, where it was very, very organized, very tight ship, to a very relaxed retail store. And we were taught, you walk in, you check the lights, you check the employees, you make sure the cash registers are going, and every customer was happy. And I was that driver. And one day they hired a woman that I didn't hire, but she was from more of emotional, more sweet. She wouldn't come from retail sales to my team, and she was my assistant manager. And one day she pulled me aside. She goes, Dorothy, I've gotten to know you, and you are a wonderful person. But did you know no one else knows you? You haven't taken the time to spend in 5 minutes or 5 seconds to look and acknowledge the person in front of you when you were a leader. So I learned from leadership, that every time I go somewhere is, if I go in a speech or if I go into a meeting or if I'm interviewing, I learn about them. I engage them. And I think leaders sometimes get so agenda-oriented and results-oriented that they forget to go in the room and just start shaking hands and saying, how are you? Or just giving a simple smile. She said, because you're really warm. It's just people fear you when you walk in the door because you're
your business.
Yes. When it comes to financial decisions, what I've learned for myself personally is just like we do with exercise or anything in life. If the habits that are working today, either in the chapter, your age, your experience, your income, or even your habits are not working, doing more of it is not, or the same is not going to work. And so even though I don't believe in punishment or shame, there is some point where you have to take accountability of change. So a good example for myself is that I always thought that I wanted to fit in and live in Lakeway and the big house and all these things because I didn't have that. That was the family that I wanted to have. Well, when I left Verizon, I realized this wasn't the income that I could live on, but I wanted to do all these things. I wanted to invest. So I downsized. And I made that decision not because it was just being financially in a position. I realized that if I wanted to do the things that I want in my next chapter, which is college or traveling, I had to take some consideration of what was important. And then I adjusted to that chapter. So I think a lot of people don't take time to realize that.
Evaluate and adjust?
Yes. And you can't budget yourself out of Netflix and going out to eat to do that.
On a personal note, since you left to spend more time with your son, how has that been?
It's been amazing. It's been amazing. He is a first-chair violist at Lake Travis, and I was on the board and was able to be involved with all the middle schools and everything else. Recently, he was taking the SATs and was actually came out and started telling me all the questions that he missed. And of course, I had no clue what he was talking about. And then every time he comes home and we travel between Lake Travis before he started having his car, I would say, how was your day? And I got a full load of what his world's like. Even my friends were like, how do you know so much? I said, because I'm always there. And that was priceless.
That is awesome. I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
So we're going to come to the end and close this out, and we like to do it with rapid fire questions. So we're going to start with like this or that, and then maybe some personality questions for fun, and then more thoughtful. You ready?
Okay.
Okay, we'll start with this or that. Boardroom or coffee shop?
Boardroom.
Plan it out or trust your gut?
Trust my gut.
Email, text, or phone call?
Phone call.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Suit and heels or jeans and sneakers?
I'm suit and heels. I'm still Sex and the City diva.
I love that. Paper planner or digital calendar?
Digital calendar.
Organized or organized chaos?
I'm really organized.
Okay. What's your superpower? Since your son asked, I want to know now. What's your superpower?
I think my superpower is the ability to make people smile.
What's something you've gotten better at with age?
Patience. Oh my gosh.
Which is amazing because sometimes that goes the opposite. People get more impatient as they age.
I don't think I had a choice. It was thrown on me. It was forced on me.
What is one thing you refuse to compromise on?
My time with my son and myself.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
I think the best advice I ever receive is more of a quote from Henry Ford, more of the, if you think you are, then yes, that's what you are. If you say you can't, you can't. But if you say you can, you can. And so I try to think about it, I can.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
What's one lesson your son has taught you that no leadership book could ever teach you?
Oh my gosh. What he used to tell me, he's like, why do you care what other people think? Just do it. Try it.
That came from your young son?
Yes.
He is wise beyond his years.
And yes, and embarrassing the heck out of me when I'm like, who's the parent here?
I'm supposed to be teaching you these lessons.
That was the best advice for him.
That's so awesome. What's one money lesson that you wished every 18-year-old knew?
Start now, and it doesn't take a lot. That's why I'm constantly teaching them. If somebody told you and I to put $25 away a week, would we be sitting here working right now?
I don't even want to think about that. Don't want to think about that.
Start now, $25.
Final question. What does a seat at the table mean to Dorothy Jones?
It means that I have finally arrived from that little unwanted child to somebody who actually can matter and influence other people.
Well, Dorothy, thank you for spending time with us today. I really do appreciate you coming in and sharing so much wisdom with us.
Oh, thank you for having
your
me.
Your website, wisdomwealth.com?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that stands out from your story is success isn't about climbing higher. Sometimes it's about having the courage to stop, reevaluate, and make choices that align with what matters most to you. So thank you for sharing that. And I really love that you say the path to real leadership starts with understanding who you are, what you value, and having the courage to take one action towards the life you really want. Thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom with us. Thank you to everyone that was listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow A Seat at the Table on social media and subscribe wherever you get podcasts.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this.
Thank you.